How do you lead when you are not in charge? So on this channel, I talk all about how to lead and facilitate meetings and gatherings, but what if you're attending that gathering and your boss or your boss's boss is leading that meeting? In this video, I'm going to share 3 influence levers that I think are run very wise and very deep that you can steal to lead when you're not in charge. They're also quite useful when you are in charge too. Number 1, will you watch the rest of this video? That is a request. What I've done is ask you, I made a request, will you watch the rest of this video? Now, if I said, watch the rest of this video, or will you watch the rest of this video, but I expected that you say yes to this, it would not be a request. A key defining principle of a request is that someone can say no. Because if they can't, there is no freedom present whatsoever. My late co-founder and co-author Will Wise introduced this idea and this kind of distinguishing around a request. If you are not in a position of leadership, one of the most profound ways you can lead is by mastering the art of making clear requests. Oftentimes what happens is in organizations is people try to position themselves or subtly plant an idea or send the boss a couple emails. Hey, look at this good idea I found. Hey, and they try to subtly influence folks. And it's fine to educate folks, but that actually feels quite manipulative. A request is extremely not manipulative. It's a really clear, hey, I'd like to play this game. Would you be willing to play this game too? And you're totally open to their response. Now, a nuance to this and some wisdom on how to share a request. Method number 2 is getting really clear about your intent and sharing it with the person who is in charge. So over and over, people come to me and say, Chad, I love your ideas around connection before content. I love your strategies. I love everything you talk about. But my boss doesn't like connection. But my boss would never do something like that. When you share an intention that benefits the common good and frames what the leader in charge does care about. So for example, a leader in charge might care about moving the project forward and finishing on time. And so if you go to them and you really want to lead connection before content for whatever reason, you want to start out with breakout conversations, and your boss would never do something like that. I might go to them and say, hey, I realize that we want to finish on time and maybe even a little bit early. I have an idea about how to double our productivity and the speed of our meeting. Would you be game to give me the first 7 minutes of the meeting to just lead a quick discussion that I think will jumpstart us about an hour? You see how that? Like intention blended in with a request. In other words, you're sharing your intent to seek consent, which seems obvious when I'm saying it now, but like at work, we often try to nudge people without seeking their consent. And when I use the word consent, which has connotations more around relationships, perhaps sexual relationships, consent, like that feels really not good to not have consent. And yet in a work context, we often try to nudge and influence and push and cajole without actually seeking consent. And so if you're not in charge, like at the top of your list should be sharing your intent to seek consent. Right before filming, I ate a cheesesteak sub with my friend Joe Mull, who is the author of a book called Employalty and another book called No More Team Drama. And I asked him, I said, we walked back to my office and I said, Joe, I'm filming a video on how to lead when you're not in charge. What do you got? And he, being an awesome Joe, wrote down some really beautiful things. One of them is he spoke to the amount of sociological research about proximity of relationship or strength of relationship is directly proportional to the amount of effort we're willing to part with. So in other words, if a random acquaintance said, hey Chad, I need to move a refrigerator. Can you come over my house and move a refrigerator? And they live 3 hours away. There is no chance that I'm driving 3 hours to help a vague acquaintance move a refrigerator. Does that make me sound like a jerk? I don't know. I think that's reasonable. I think that's very reasonable. If my mom, who lives 8 hours away, said, hey Chad, I really need your help moving a refrigerator, I'd probably first ask, is there anybody else nearby that could help you move a refrigerator? And if she said no, I would get in my car, I would drive 8 hours and help her move that refrigerator. Because the depth of that connection and that relationship is quite strong. And so I'm willing to part with quite a lot of time and effort to love and support and be a friend and a good son to, in this case, my mom. And so if you want to lead when you're not in charge, form deeper relationships. When you know people well and they know you well, they are willing to part with effort to help you work towards something. And so in other words, when you do number 1 and number 2 of making requests and sharing your intent and seeking that consent, when you do those with people who you have a depth of relationship already established, they're much, much more likely to say, yes, I would love to help and support you. And so you get to influence without any manipulation. The final bonus way to lead when you're not in charge is to send your boss a link to the Connector Summit, which is almost certainly below in the description somewhere. Have an awesome day.